This review will focus on the Epistle and Gospel of the Divine Liturgy, which takes place right after the little entrance. Here we have the singing of the Troparion and Kontakion. It's customary for the clergy to take the Now and Ever, the final Kontakion. In some cases, it might not be practical if we don't have competent singers or someone to lead within the altar if it's a very small group, but otherwise, this should be done. At this part we have, O Lord, save the pious, the exclamation, now and ever and unto ages of ages. Proto-deacon then returns to the altar through the royal doors, goes to the high place and does his veneration, and receives the deacony from the altar server. He then brings it to the hierarch, who then places it on the gospel. The Holy God is sung antiphonally, with the choir taking the first, the clergy taking the second time, and then the choir again taking the third, heading into glory now and ever. The choir will then sing one more time, and then the clergy, and then the choir will finish.
Сегодня это фрагменты из книги «Деяний апостольских», которая читалась в храмах и в домах верующих на протяжении всего пасхального периода.
И посети виноград сей, и утверди его же насади, десница Твоя.
Возри с небес Божия и увидь, и посети этот духовный сад, и укрепи его, ибо его насадила десница Твоя. Духовный сад, Церковь Христова, насажденная Сыном Божиим.
As the hierarch returns to the altar, he goes to venerate the altar. He then ascends to the high place and blesses the altar and gives it up. And then we see the proto-deacon, or common times the server, will then give the hierarch the trikity, and he will then bless again and give up the trikity, and it will be put back in its place as we see the servers bow. We can see the second deacon already in place with the epistle book, standing and receiving the blessing. Once the hierarch completes the third blessing with the trikity, he then receives a blessing to read the epistle from the hierarch, and then exits through the royal doors to the center of the church to read the epistle. Immediately after that, the censer is brought to the hierarch with a boat of incense, and that is placed on the censer for the censing. All of this should be prepared before the hierarch is in place, assuming that there are enough servers to do so. I think it's important to notice here that everyone is very calm and in place in waiting for the next liturgical act to take place. So what they're waiting for now is for the hierarch to give the blessing with peace be unto all. Then you'll notice the two servers are standing there with the third deacon, or in other cases could be another server. That other server or that third deacon is waiting to collect a large omophorion, and the two subdeacons are waiting to take it off. So once the hierarch proclaims peace be unto all and blesses the faithful, the large omophorion then comes off, and that third deacon or other server is in place to collect that. So we see that it goes over the head to the back, over again in front, and placed in the arms of the carrier, and is blessed. And the carrier now goes to the south side of the altar where he waits there, whether it be a server or a third deacon.
«Вознесись на небеса Божия, и по всей земле да воссияет слава Твоя».
апостол чтение. Он мем. Первое губослов голя же о Царстве Божии, с ними же яды повелеем, от Иерусалима не отлучайтеся, но ждайте обетования Отча, еже слышасте от меня, яко Иоанн ума крестил с водою, вы же имате креститесь Духом Святым, не по многих сих днях.
The proto-deacon goes around, sensing the altar as usual, the sanctuary, the iconostas. He comes back in and senses the hierarch 9 times, and the serving clergy heads back out, sense the epistle reader, the faithful. We can also see that the servers are now getting ready for the gospel reading, lighting the bishop's candle, the fans are in place. We see that there's plenty of time and preparation so that nothing's rushed or clumsy.
одежде белы, я же есть близ Иерусалима, субботы.
We can now see that towards the end of the epistle reading here, there's some movement going on as we're getting ready for the gospel taken out to the center of the church. At this point, the first priest goes to the front of the altar with the deacon, does his bows, gives the proto-deacon the gospel. We see that the third deacon is now leading the gospel out in procession. The servers have already exited the altar. We see that the gospel is then presented to the hierarch by the proto-deacon, gives a bow, and then heads out to the center of the church for the gospel reading. And he is led by the homophorion. The homophorion goes through the royal doors if it's a deacon, if it's a server, just through the deacon doors. We see this procession here taking place. And you see the proto-deacon, the third deacon rather, stops and waits for the second deacon who's finishing the Alleluias for the epistle. What they'll do is they'll head in the altar together through the royal doors. So they should be entering at the same time. So that large homophorion, whether it be the third deacon or a server, waits for the epistle reader, and then heads into the altar at its completion. Here's another view from a different service of the large homophorion and the epistle entering the altar together. A nice view of where you stand, close to the altar. The homophorion returns to the spot where it was before, on the south side, with the epistle on the north side. And they stand there and wait for the dialogue to take place. So it's first that the proto-deacon receives the blessing from the hierarch to read the gospel. The second deacon, then wisdom, let us attend, let us listen to the holy gospel. The hierarch, peace be unto all, and the choir, and with thy spirit. The proto-deacon, the main deacon, reading the gospel, announces who the gospel is from, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. And then the third deacon finally, with the let us attend. At that point, very important, because what happens is after that let us attend, both the second and third deacon venerate the altar table and then go to the high place to receive a blessing from the hierarch, kissing his hands after the blessing, and then returning to a nondescriptive spot on the altar. So just returning to any place off to the side, as their liturgical function has now been completed.